Hi folks, welcome to the, I think, 7th videocast from iWrite Radio. I've got Stewart Lockhead with me and Jimmy Hutton, and I'm Norrie Stewart. We'll also do this as an audio podcast for those of you that can't stand looking at our faces. And we've every sympathy with you. But,
Absolutely.
you know, we've got to do it every day, guys.
I was about to say that.
Some of us more than others, because clearly there's only one of us that can be bothered looking in the mirror every couple of days and having a shave.
Oh, right, okay. Get your retaliation in first. We're going to start with a discussion about the reporting that we're getting from the various mainstream media channels and newspapers, I suppose. So, Jimmy, you've got a particular bee in your bonnet about this. You want to start?
Well, BBC, never been the biggest fan of the state broadcaster anyway, but I did notice a couple of things today in particular. The rolling banner across the bottom of BBC news coverage is now telling you that frontline testing for NHS staff will start next week in England. Unfortunately, somewhat inaccurate because it's starting in all 4 nations in the UK. But also they're stopping the Scottish segment on breakfast, which has run every half hour of every breakfast TV programme since the instituted breakfast television when I was at secondary school, which is a long time ago now. And the last thing I'd want to say on that is the BBC, I tend to watch them, BBC ITV, and then go to Channel 4 to get a balanced coverage. And it's noticeable just how much better Channel 4 News has been getting things from all over the planet.
I think there's a specific item we're going to discuss that was on Channel 4 News last night. Stuart, you reckon that there's good reason that the BBC and I believe ITV are cutting down on the time they're spending on Scottish programming?
Well, STV's primetime news at 6 o'clock. Up until 3 weeks ago, it was always presented jointly from Edinburgh and Glasgow, a reporter in each studio. It just suddenly vanished, and it's just all back to Glasgow now. That's understandable. The people are off sick and things. That's I'm not surprised. However, bear in mind one very quick reference back to the Scottish independence referendum. We discovered at that time that it's part of the BBC's charter to protect the interests of the United Kingdom. And they actually handed out gongs to civil servants in London that undermined the case for the Scottish independence. Now, basically, Jimmy's right, it is the state broadcaster, and we've all seen it more and more and more, especially now. Oh, we're in a crisis now. Oh, don't ask any tricky questions. You can hear them being whispered in the ears of the reporters.
I think, well, one thing I would point out, it's part of the new charter. It wasn't part of the charter in 2014. It was just presumed that their job was to side with the union. It's now written into the charter.
Yeah, now it's specific.
Yeah, the part of their remit is to maintain the union of the 4 countries of the UK. I think there will be things change down the line here as well. I mean, now that they've actually been forced to start using internet connections for interviews, etc., that's going to be cheaper for them. We're going to see more of that once this pandemic is over. It means that we kind of get to be, as independent broadcasters ourselves, amateurs, we get to be on a par with them. I mean, this particular software we're using could be used for interviews, etc., not just a video cast. So that'd be an interesting thing, an interesting possible outcome. Could also lead to longer dole queues for presenters, I think.
Well, I think we've already seen, Norrie, that there is so like independence TV and what have you floating around, but I think more and more you will get product like what we're coming out with now. You'll get far more independence-minded people going, you know what, this is doable.
Yeah.
This is doable. This is doable on a national level and a decent scale.
And then the other change, that not because of the coronavirus, but just talking about people broadcasting. This is a videocast. You can watch this anytime you want. You don't have to be there for the 9 o'clock news or whatever. Yeah. It's there. iPlayer now exists, Netflix, Amazon Prime TV, all that. So that younger generation that you're using that will expect to be able to access the information they want, the programs they want to see, when they want, not according to a schedule dictated by somebody else. Talking of which, dictation, Jimmy, you mentioned the fact that it was newsworthy that England was getting frontline testing for the NHS. I've tended to watch BBC and then go to Channel 4. Channel 4 did a very good piece last night on something Scotland's doing differently, which is opening up basically coronavirus clinics, where if you think you've got it, you go to your local clinic, not your GP, not your hospital, not your emergency room. There's a clinic available for you to go to get tested.
You have to be referred.
You have to be referred, do you? Right.
Yes, you can't just walk up.
It's appointment only. You do it initially through the old 111 phone thing. But the big thing that I was impressed with is the fact that they've rolled this out. There are 50 centres around the country. It will keep all other healthcare patients away from coronavirus patients in terms of going to your initial examination. And the staffing that they've got in there, it was brilliant that they spoke to some of the staff. These are people who have volunteered to go front and centre against coronavirus, knowing the risks, knowing it could be risky to them personally. But this, and it's a great idea. It's something that I believe that we've kind of tweaked on, something that the Germans and the Chinese have kind of put similar things in place. It's unique in the UK.
The South Koreans, with their telephone box set up with the wee holes for the gloves and everything, that looked very impressive. And I must admit,
for testing?
Yeah, they do it various ways. They've got drive-ins and so on, which we had in Scotland as well. I don't know if that's still on the go. We discussed that a week ago.
They're hoping to get it up and running again next week.
And then they've got they look like telephone kiosks, but you know these, what do they call them? These extraction cabinets that they work with in laboratories with the 2 holes with the gloves. I noticed they didn't show you how they worked, but I noticed they had that. So you could be external to it completely and still protected. Good idea. But Stewart, you felt that shouldn't have been Channel 4's scoop. That should have been...
well, it should have been on the BBC.
Well, I mean, specifically at the presser, it should have been mentioned.
Yes, it came as a surprise to me because it was so newsworthy, so important for the people of Scotland. I was just surprised it wasn't mentioned at the First Minister's presser. And that was, mind you, that was at 12:30 lunchtime, and the Channel 4 iTunes didn't go out till after 7. So I mean, there is that issue.
I'm not sure they're up and running yet. I'm wondering if she's waiting to announce it when they're actually running.
I think they're running from Monday, so maybe she's going to do a wee piece on Sunday for the BBC to Gordon Brewer. Although, let's be honest, if she does a wee piece to Gordon Brewer, there's every chance that they'll can it or spike it, because he doesn't like a positive news story about Scotland, does he?
No, the sound will go wrong. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I don't know if you noticed that the sound at the St Andrew's House pressers with the First Minister has been a trifle dodgy.
It's been a bit shocking. It's not dodgy. It's absolutely outrageous. I mean, we're amateur techies, and we could have done a better job of that. That was something I would definitely complain about.
It's a conspiracy. There's a Brit-Nat plant in there that's fiddling with the wires and that.
Well, it might
no,
be. It might be really clever. We spoke before we came on air about the Tories are now putting up their A-team question avoidance guys. You know, I've already answered that question. No, you haven't. You've answered the question you wanted to answer and totally ignored the question you were asked, guys.
That's what they're trained to do.
Yeah, I know that.
Getting...
But I wonder if these the Scottish Government press meetings are having such bad sound for the questions in case she wants to do the same thing. We don't hear the question. She could be answering anything half the time.
No, it's very noticeable that she does actually answer the question she's asked.
I was joking, Stuart. I was joking.
Can I just throw in another reporting organisation? Whenever I do, I flick across to Dublin and watch the Irish news. And last night they had their major announcement about the Irish lockdown, which is, you could say, they're actually a week or so behind, 10 days behind the UK on caseloads, the number of infections and deaths and things. But they were so much more professional. It's breathtaking going from watching that crowd in 10 Downing Street across to Dublin. And then when they announced all the what was involved in the lockdown, they told you everything that you couldn't do. Instead of having double standards or whatever they tell, having to row back down at 10 Downing Street. For example, but they did make one very nice line, which I thought was, which I haven't seen mentioned before. This is to all the public. Every imposition will save a life. In other words, if you can't do it to let your dog pee, you could be saving a life. And I thought, well, you need to make it a bit like that.
Is it the Irish that have put the 2 kilometre distance from your home thing in?
Yeah, they said 2 kilometres.
See that?
Most week.
If you think about the stramash about, was it in Derbyshire, sorry, that the police had the drone up. We talked about it yesterday.
Just draws a line around it.
That one specific thing, if they turned around and said, right, we don't want anybody travelling any more than 2 kilometres from their house, that would have knocked that on the head. All that stramash about it. They could have said, look, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Glasgow. Well, you shouldn't be in the north of England. And it makes it easier for people to, if people know what they can and can't do, it makes it a lot easier to obey the rules. If you don't know what the rules are, you're living in a dictatorship, which is kind of your point yesterday, Jimmy. If the police start applying different rules in different areas, that's going to lead to problems.
Yeah. Whilst we're on the subject of people doing things well, can I just bring up Professor Jason Leach on Breakfast Time this morning? Probably the best interview I've seen since any of this started. He was so clear in what he was telling us, but he also told us quite a few new things that other people just either aren't being asked or aren't volunteering. For example, he says that they are learning from other countries. It's going to take 2 weeks for interventions to show in the numbers. So he said that we should expect to see benefits from these interventions, i.e. the lockdown and what have you, starting from about a week on Monday. And a week after that should be what he considers the peak. He then went on to say that there's a curve on the way out as well. The restrictions didn't just get lifted straight away. Hong Kong done that and got not necessarily a second wave, but an increase again in the number of infections. And what he also said is that seasonal flu is almost gone in Scotland. So if you do get symptoms, it's very likely that you now have coronavirus. I've never heard any medical professional saying that. It was great to hear that clarity.
You also mentioned a stat about the frontline health.
Yeah, he was talking about NHS staff and social care staff. He put them both together, which is a lovely Scottish thing because they actually are combined in Scotland. but what he said was 7% of the health and social care workforce are self-isolating at the moment. First time I've heard that figure, and I'm surprised it's quite so low. I'm delighted that it's quite so low as well.
It's an important figure. And it's a reassuring figure, because I must admit, I thought it would be up about 15-20%.
Me too, given that the London Underground's got 34% of people self-isolating and off sick at the moment. For us only to have 7 at the front line like you say, it's reassuring.
And it's reassuring for the staff that are involved. Yes, Stuart.
I've got an interesting little story to tell you guys. The other day, I've got a neighbour who gets care. He's severely disabled and he gets care visits every day. This week, a couple of volunteer carers turned up. They must have been short from the regulars. Hadn't seen them before. They couldn't get in. The client wasn't responding. So the fire brigade turned up.
That's what your fire brigade was.
Aye, and it took them half an hour to break in without smashing the windows up. If there'd been a fire, I would have shouted at them, for fuck's sake, break in and stop the fire. But they were trying to obviously get in without completely smashing the door up. It took them half an hour to get in. But it struck me at the time, well, there's a sort of thing that can go wrong, because you've got regular carers who know the system and how to get in. Your voluntary ones, they weren't able to do so, and that ended up with using the fire brigade.
Has the guy not got a key box?
I don't keep up with all the details.
Normally they would have a key box so that people can get in, but if they're volunteers, they were maybe given the wrong
code
combination. Code for it.
Well, Stuart, I've got an idea. You should nip down to the guy, get a spare key, and stick a note on his door. If you're struggling to get in, come and give me coronavirus.
Yeah.
Sorry. Come and get the key for me. You can throw it out the window to them.
So there was an item that I think I'm not the only person that came across it. Was this? There was a bit about. I think it was in Channel 4. Krishna Gurumurthy interviewed a professor. I'm not sure where he came from, but he was
the
discussing
Italian guy.
The Italian guy.
He's actually a writer. He's written a book.
It was very, very interesting, and about the consequences, how our democracy might change because of the coronavirus. And he covered, without going into everything, he covered things that we talk about, and we've talked about before. To some extent, it's a problem just now. There's an awful lot of people here in the UK really just don't trust the government at all, and so every time Boris Johnson stands up and tells them what to do, they say F you, because they don't believe him. And some of them will probably be the people that were gathering in the parks last weekend and causing trouble. And this guy used one or two interesting lines. He said, "It's no good just policing an ignorant public. It's like if you keep the public ignorant and then you have to police them to get them to behave instead of them keeping them informed, and they behave themselves not without being told to." And he basically said that in recent years, politicians, and he mentioned the United States in particular, been undermining the trust. They've been persuading people that not to believe this science, not to believe experts. And a lot of people just get their information from the net, not from the experts, shall we say.
The point he made that sort of lit up for me was when he talked about politicians being prepared to lie and deceive to get the prize of power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've had Brexit. I said it out loud, boys. Brexit.
Oh, yeah.
Which has underlined that for me totally. There are too many people in power in this country who are prepared to say anything to maintain or to get that power.
Aye. It's perfectly acceptable now to act in a manner that 10 years ago would have cost you any possible opportunity of a political career. Now
Exactly.
it actually enhances your chances, as we were talking about earlier. If you're Nadine Zahawi and can go on Newsnight and for 10 minutes answer not one single question that you're asked and just pump out the spiel that Dominic Cummings wants you to pump out, that's lying. That is barefaced lying, but now it's an asset.
And exactly, it's considered a political necessity. It's part of the tool bag. Now, will this change any of that? I doubt it. I can't see it. I can't see the Tories suddenly turning around and saying, right, we're having another election, and this time we're going to tell the truth.
No, but I did like his allusion that this will change society in ways that we have no idea of, like the two wars did in the 20th century. Because this, as a worldwide pandemic, and if it gets as bad as they've hinted at, and let's be honest, when it gets to places like Syria and Afghanistan, we're going to sit and watch hundreds of thousands of people die, because we're watching thousands of people die in countries that have seriously good health services. So when it gets into Afghanistan and that, it's going to kill plenty.
It's true. He did have a very simple example of how things could change. He was saying for 20 years, the university he works at, they've been trying to get the courses online. 20 years they've been trying, couldn't get them online. Because of the virus, he got them all online in a week. And he doesn't think they'll go back after the virus crisis is over.
And what a fabulous way to open up education to many more people all over the planet.
But as an example, it won't be the only thing. But on the other hand, we've already referred to the possibility that having taken, well, we haven't actually mentioned it yet, but all these emergency powers that countries are taking all over the world, governments, will they hand them back afterwards?
Yeah, well, Jimmy's point must be a couple of years ago, and I think it's Cornell University in America basically put courses online, and they're like one of the Ivy League universities.
Oh, they're one of the top ones.
And I think you do pay for them, but I think in some countries, African, India, etc., and their rationale for it is, right, okay, you've done the work, but if you want the PhD, you'll need to come to Cornell and you'll need to give us $100,000 or whatever for your tuition for your PhD. But it's interesting because you can access quite a lot of it for free.
Certainly Edinburgh University, they've got some interesting stuff on throughout the summer. They tend to ramp it up during the festival and that. There's loads of online courses at Edinburgh Uni over the summer. And I think it's the same if you actually want academic credit for it. You've got to either pay for it or they'll ask you to go in and maybe, particularly in the scientific area, go in and give them a year's work for 8-10 grand or something, and then they'll credit you you get the academic credit for it.
Well, I suppose, I mean, it's fair enough. They're doing the work, but should the government possibly be subsidizing that? I think there will be changes, and I hope they're political changes.
Yeah, there was one other thing, and there was so much in this very short interview. I think it's Professor Harry was his surname, Harri, that we were all talking about. One other thing he did say, he said that what's happened recently is that, including the financial crisis just over 10 years ago, generally speaking, the world looks to the USA to lead on world crisis. But the USA has now abdicated leadership, and it now has no friends either. And we know why. Making America great again means ignoring the rest of the world. So there is no world leadership. So that's a bit worrying, given that we've got a worldwide crisis.
Well, I think
it's worrying because there's nobody there to fill that gap. Europe can't do it. The EU, China kind of would do it, I think, but in a different way to the way America. I can't see China ever becoming the world's policeman, for instance.
No.
And if Putin does it, he's going to want to own every country he puts a boot in.
Aye.
The World Health Organization, they have that fellow that makes these daily press announcements. He's very good, and the website is very, very good. And they don't just cover, they cover a lot of issues that are actually topical in this country.
Yeah, but the World Health Organization, are they not just a part of the UN? I thought the UN set the WHO up.
I think they
could
are.
be, could not. I would imagine
Let's be
well.
honest, nobody.
No, they'll be well independent of that, Jimmy, of the UN. They wouldn't want to get involved in the politics there.
But there's never been a supranational organisation that's ever been taken seriously. And the World Health Organization may be the first. Things like the UN are taken seriously up to a point. But when it comes to America or Russia or whatever, they didn't take them seriously because they have no recriminations for ignoring them.
Jimmy, they've got Russia, America, China, Britain. Who's the other one?
France.
So you've got 5 countries who can veto everything and anything.
Aye.
So, the UN you're back on, yeah.
You know, I mean, a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if anything.
Has the UN ever managed to stop a conflict?
Korea.
Well,
that's another story.
Well, did the UN stop Korea?
I don't know.
Did America realize they couldn't win?
Let's cheer us up a wee bit. There was a very interesting, it was like a letter from Italy. And it was a quite heartwarming, a wee bit worrying, but quite heartwarming in a way, predicting just how conditions in Britain will be, judging by what they were like in Italy 2 weeks ago. And it's not talking about all the people dying and all these particular health issues, how the public was behaving and how people, people are going online and this singing from their balconies and all this kind of stuff. It was quite heartwarming. Did you read it, Norrie?
No, but I've kind of been following all the sort of, well, what would you call it? Socializing, I suppose, at a distance. It's quite interesting. I mean, as Jimmy said yesterday, the hand clapping for me was just a propaganda exercise.
It was a bit contrived.
But the sort of spontaneous stuff, which was the original stuff coming out of Italy, it's quite heartwarming. Unfortunately, it won't make a single dent on the powers that be. I mean, the big argument at the end of all this will be between the people that want to go back to the way it was before the pandemic and the people that want to keep the good changes in place. That's the argument in a nutshell, I think.
Just to bring us back to today and this next week or so, rather than what we might gain after all this, kind of reckon this is the week for Scotland, guys. If the numbers do not rocket this week, I think we may start to get a little bit of an outlook that we might not be getting hit as bad as we possibly were going to. Because the numbers at the moment aren't bad in the UK. Sorry, they are in certain places. Birmingham, the East Midlands, for example, they've got a horrendous infection rate down there. London. Manchester's no bad at the moment. Scotland's certainly no bad. Wales is all right. So this is the week. If it's really going to scud us, it's this week and next weekend that the numbers will go through the roof.
One of the things that will be interesting will be to watch Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland will be impacted by the what's been put in place south of the border in the Republic. So it'll be interesting to see how
don't they have the best? Don't they have kind of numbers-wise? They're the best part of the UK at the moment as well, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And I'm presuming, I take it the ferries aren't running.
I don't think.
No. I don't know what the situation about there is.
I've never heard mention of the ferries to Ireland.
Well, given that 2/3 of the beef sold in this country comes from Ireland, if the ferries don't run, there won't be any beef.
That's a good point, yeah. I was really meaning passenger-wise, not so much.
Coos.
coos and pigs and things. Anyway, anybody got a last item they'd like to bring up?
Can we just send out best wishes to Alistair Jack?
Oh, yes, of course. What a shame. What a pity. Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, has gone into self-isolation on his 50 billion acre croft down in the south of Scotland due to coronavirus.
I do hope somebody's cut his phone line so we didn't actually have to hear for the ballbag when he's in self-isolation as well.
I've got a sneaky feeling that if he doesn't have a secretary at his shoulder, he'll have any idea how to work technology.
His secretary's not his shoulder, mate. He's a spitting image puppet. His secretary's LB deep.
Well, I did hear that someone claiming that there was a little bit of a hot spot in Aberdeenshire, but I think they were just making that up just so they could have a go at Prince Charles and his entourage arriving with these people with viruses.
Nope, the numbers were up in Grampian by like 42%. There was 14 more cases reported, and that was a genuine statistic.
Yeah, but that's probably the 14 that turned up with Prince Charles.
Well, I was about to say whether that was centered on Blantyre, I don't know, but they were definitely genuine figures. And that is a story to be told if it proves to be true.
Oh, just while we're on that, have you seen there's a couple of brilliant memes popping around at the moment where you've got William and Harry, and William saying, "Father's got the virus," and Harry's reply, "Yours has." That gives us a laugh to end on, chat.
Okay, and we will call it a day at that because we're all smiling. Second Saturday, I'm not calling it lockdown, I'm calling it a lock-in. I've decided that's more cheery than a lockdown.
Lock-in's got far better connotations than what I'm going through the now, mate.
It's a psychological trick. Thanks for listening, folks, and thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Jimmy, for being on.
Yes.
I'm Norrie. As I say, there'll be an audio podcast, which is the soundtrack of this, if you don't want to look at our ugly faces. Cheers for now, folks.